I first laid eyes on Naomi during a casual Sunday brunch hosted by a mutual friend. I remember the scent of freshly baked pastries mingling with the warm chatter of the group. She walked in just after I arrived, wearing a pale blue sundress and a friendly smile. Her laughter carried across the room, instantly drawing my attention. I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time, my last one had ended a few months prior, leaving me more cautious than eager, but there was something genuine about her. She introduced herself with a bright energy, asked me about my life, and seemed sincerely interested in my answers. When we spoke, it felt as though the rest of the room faded, and I found myself wanting to impress her, to keep her laughing and leaning in. That day, as people came and went, Naomi stuck by my side, exchanging jokes and glances that felt promising. Before we parted, she asked if I'd like to meet again sometime. I still remember the twinge of surprise that fluttered in my chest. Usually, I was the one who asked for the next date, but she turned the tables in a charming way. Over the next few weeks, we became inseparable. One day, we were wandering through a local art market, and she pointed out a painting that spoke to her. She explained how the colors represented hope, how the brushstrokes conveyed longing. I stood there, listening to her poetic take on everything, thinking how refreshing it was to be with someone so articulate and passionate. I asked myself if this could be the start of something beautiful, something to believe in again. When we finally made our relationship official, my friends teased me about how smitten I was. Maybe I was, but it felt right. Naomi had a way of brightening up any room she entered. She became friends with my coworkers after just one happy hour. My mother, who was notoriously hard to impress, remarked that Naomi had a good spirit about her, a rare compliment indeed. I started to envision a future where Naomi and I might share a home, maybe a dog, weekend trips to the countryside, and random nights binging documentaries on the couch. In short, I fell for her, deeply and wholeheartedly. Still, I never imagined that a year later, I would be sitting in a dark room, replaying every small detail, desperately trying to figure out how I hadn't seen the signs of betrayal forming right before my eyes. At the start, I felt immensely comfortable. We quickly established a rhythm together. Naomi was often at my place, and the apartment transformed from my predictable bachelor space into something more vibrant. She added small touches, a colorful throw blanket, a few scented candles, fresh flowers in a vase. I'd get home from work to find the smell of cooking onions and spices wafting through the door. She loved experimenting in the kitchen, and I happily let her use the space as her culinary playground. In return, I took care of the cleanup and the errands. It felt like an equal exchange, and our synergy was tangible. Over the next 6 months, Naomi and I merged more aspects of our lives. She temporarily left her roommate's cramped place to stay with me, though we never called it moving in officially. Her clothes ended up in my closets, her books filled my shelves, and her shampoo and lotions lined my bathroom sink. Before I realized it, we were living like a married couple, waking up side by side, grocery shopping together, splitting bills. We were close, and I truly believed we were happy. We'd spend lazy Saturday mornings reading the newspaper, sipping coffee, then maybe take a stroll in the park. Sometimes we'd binge-watch an entire season of a new show, heads resting on each other's shoulders, arms tangled under a shared blanket. Looking back on those moments, I remember feeling a comforting warmth, a sense that I had someone in my corner. And yet, there must have been hints of a hidden storm brewing. Even in the beginning, there were minor red flags I brushed aside. Naomi sometimes acted overly friendly with random men we'd meet, whether at a bar, a casual get-together, or even the grocery store. I'd see it as a quirk of her personality. She thrived on social connection and attention. At times, I'd catch a flicker of annoyance in myself, but I stifled it. Part of loving someone, I reminded myself, was accepting their social nature. Whenever I teased her about it, she'd shrug and say, "Come on, I'm just being nice." I'd laugh it off, even though a small part of me felt uneasy. But no relationship is perfect, I told myself. Everyone has flaws, and I considered her affectionate manner just one of hers. I never guessed how far that trait might lead her astray. We settled into a comfortable routine. I'd wake up at 7 to get ready for work, and she'd follow around 8, preparing to do some freelancing or to head into her part-time gig at a local boutique. In the evenings, we'd reconvene for dinner, talk about our days, then watch a show or catch up on some reading. Occasionally, she'd head out on her own for a coffee date with friends or an exercise class. I was never the controlling type, so I gave her space. In fact, I appreciated our separate interests, confident that trust and respect formed the bedrock of our relationship. I had no reason to suspect that her solo outings might be more than they seemed. Everything began shifting when Naomi developed a fascination for these weekend wellness retreats just outside the city. They were short, 2-day getaways, supposedly focused on yoga, meditation, and personal development. She claimed they were the perfect chance to recharge her mental and emotional batteries. At first, I applauded her initiative, even offering to join her. But she insisted she needed to go alone. She said it was personal, that she wanted to find clarity away from her daily routines. I supported this, reminding myself that independence was healthy in a relationship. Yet something about her hushed phone calls to the retreat organizers, the mysterious text messages she'd receive, and the vague way she described what happened at these events began to gnaw at me. I'd ask questions about what she did there, but she offered only generic answers about long yoga sessions and deep meditation that sounded rehearsed. Still, I didn't press. I believed we were strong enough for complete trust. On her second wellness retreat, I felt an unease so powerful that I could barely sleep. I spent that weekend reorganizing the apartment, burying myself in chores, and texting her short messages like, "Hope you're doing well," or "Missing you." She replied sporadically, blaming spotty reception in the woods. Then, late Sunday evening, she came home in strangely high spirits, more energetic than usual. I tried to push aside my worries, telling myself she had simply enjoyed a revitalizing experience. That night, she fell asleep quickly. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my fears were baseless or if my intuition was trying to warn me. I discovered the truth in the most mundane of ways. We shared a laptop, and we each had our own login. She often forgot to log out of her social media, but normally I'd never snoop. However, one day I needed to use a design program for work, so I hopped on her profile to see if the software was already installed under her name. That was when I noticed a string of messages from a man named Ethan. The conversation was innocuous at first glance, but there were hidden contexts, references to the cabin, how incredible the last retreat was, and looking forward to next time. My heart pounded, but I told myself it could be purely platonic. Then, with a sinking feeling, I saw the timestamps matched the exact weekends of her so-called wellness retreats. A wave of panic washed over me, but I maintained my composure long enough to check one more series of messages. Ethan's thread was peppered with hearts and winks, jokes about how Naomi should take care of that handsome boyfriend at home, and about how they could always sneak away for more private sessions. The language dripped with innuendo. My pulse raced, and I felt an ache in my chest. It was as if the ground beneath me had crumbled, and I was left standing on an island of uncertainty. I shut down the laptop, heart hammering, mind swirling with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it purely physical or something deeper? And why had she bothered with such an elaborate cover story about yoga and meditation? She came home that evening to find me sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the dark television screen. She looked concerned, setting her keys on the table. "You okay, babe?" she asked gently. I nodded stiffly, not sure how to begin. I wrestled with myself over whether I should confront her directly or wait to gather more evidence. In the end, my emotions got the better of me. I blurted out that I knew about Ethan, that I'd seen the messages, that I knew her retreats were a sham. Naomi's mouth fell open, her face blanching. She tried to stutter something, but her words jammed up in her throat. I repeated Ethan's name, demanding she tell me everything. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and her voice quivered as she mumbled disjointed excuses. She started by saying it wasn't what I thought, that Ethan was just a friend. I cut her off, anger flaring. Friends don't sneak off to cabins for private sessions, Naomi, I snapped. Caught, she broke down. Through sobs, she admitted she'd been seeing him for a few months, that it started when she felt we were drifting apart somehow. My stomach twisted at the irony. I never felt us drifting. She tried to frame it as emotional confusion, a silly mistake. But I pressed further. Explain the details, I insisted. She sniffed, eyes darting around the room, as though searching for an escape. Then she said something that left me dumbfounded. I was only cheating because I needed to test my loyalty to you. I stared at her, stunned. My first reaction was disbelief, then shock, then a burning anger. Test your loyalty? I repeated, incredulous. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She insisted she read somewhere that if you feel unsure about your commitment, stepping outside the relationship could help you value what you have at home. It was so twisted, so outlandish, that for a moment I wondered if she had lost her mind. She blabbered on about how she'd never realized how much she loved me until she spent time with another man, and how she wanted to confirm her feelings. She talked about some pseudo-psychological concept of regrounding her heart. She said that being with Ethan made her certain I was the man she truly wanted. I was speechless. I'd heard some ridiculous justifications in my life, but this topped them all. I spent that night in a haze of anger and disbelief. I replayed every phrase she spoke, stuck on the ridiculous notion that she cheated to test her loyalty. How does one test loyalty by breaking it? The logical contradiction only fueled my frustration. I tried to distract myself, played some music, attempted to watch a show, but I couldn't shake the gnawing sense of betrayal. Finally, around 3 a.m, I passed out on the couch, exhaustion overriding the adrenaline coursing through my system. In the days that followed, Naomi texted incessantly, leaving voicemail after voicemail. She apologized, explaining how much she regretted her stupidity, how she'd been influenced by that worthless piece of advice from an online guru. She offered to attend counseling, to do anything to prove she was serious about repairing our relationship. Meanwhile, my friends buzzed with indignation on my behalf. The story of her test spread among our circle, eliciting reactions ranging from pity to outraged disbelief. My friend Simon wanted me to block her completely, to cut her off. My sister, who had been fond of Naomi, felt personally betrayed. She told me that Naomi's reasoning was so insulting, it diminished real relationships everywhere. I admitted I had no intention of taking her back, but a small, masochistic corner of my heart still ached with the memory of our good times. Initially, I ignored Naomi's attempts at contact, too outraged to speak with her. Then, one evening, she showed up at my apartment unexpectedly. I opened the door to find her standing there, tears in her eyes, clutching a small bag of my favorite takeout. "I just want to talk," she said softly. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She set the food on the table and tried to hand me a typed letter. I looked down, noticing it was a printed apology, meticulously organized into paragraphs. The headings read like a confession: why I did it, what I realized, how I plan to make it right. I stared at it, speechless. She explained she wanted to express her remorse without rambling incoherently, so she put her thoughts on paper. I swallowed hard, scanning her carefully chosen words. It read like an academic exercise in self-blame and regret, peppered with references to the nonsense about realizing the depth of her love through comparison. I felt an odd mixture of anger, pity, and a flicker of old affection. She insisted that she truly believed our relationship was stronger than ever in her mind, because these mistakes had shown her how good we were together. The mental gymnastics behind that statement left me stunned, but part of me was curious to hear her out. She asked me for an open conversation, so I obliged. We sat down, the takeout growing cold. She confessed in detail how it started. She'd stumbled upon some viral video about confronting the fear of missing out, and it claimed that if you're anxious about settling down, you should explore your options fully to avoid regrets. The more she listened, the more it convinced her that she might be missing something. What if I'm too comfortable with you and ignoring my own needs, she recalled thinking. According to her, the affair began as a one-time fling, but Ethan kept inviting her back to these weekend retreats, which were nothing more than meetups at a rented cabin with a group of like-minded individuals who believed in pushing the boundaries of traditional relationships. Each time she returned, she claimed she was torn between guilt and curiosity. By the time she realized how wrong it was, she felt trapped in the lie. It sounded like a convoluted scenario, but I believed she'd indeed fallen into that rabbit hole. I listened, absorbing every word. My heart clenched painfully as she detailed how her guilt grew each time she faked these wellness getaways. She cried, saying she hated lying to me, that her love for me never wavered. I asked why she never considered simply talking to me about her doubts. Her tear-filled eyes darted around, and she admitted she feared I'd see her as selfish or disloyal just for having these questions. The irony made me laugh bitterly. By avoiding an honest conversation, she ended up doing the worst thing possible. She nodded, acknowledging the absurdity. I took a long breath, trying to maintain composure. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but there was no guarantee we could repair this. The wound she inflicted was deep, and I wasn't sure any excuse, particularly one as ludicrous as testing loyalty, could ever justify her actions. She spent the night at a friend's place after that conversation, respecting my request for space. Over the next few weeks, she sent me postcards, letters, and text messages detailing her therapy sessions with an actual counselor who was helping her dismantle the ridiculous beliefs she had embraced. She even invited me to join the sessions. I declined, unwilling to open my vulnerability any further. Yet, my anger began to subside from a raging inferno to a simmering resentment. I found myself looking forward to a normal life without the heavy weight of her presence. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the emptiness in the apartment. The nights felt colder, the quiet more suffocating. I missed our old conversations, her laughter, the brightness she'd brought into my daily routine. My friends, unwavering in their judgment, said I should move on, find someone who respected me enough not to play with my trust. I mostly agreed, but a small part of me questioned if I could salvage this relationship. Perhaps if her excuse had been less ridiculous, I might have shut the door forever. But it was precisely the absurdity of her rationale that made me suspect she was more naive than malicious. I began to wonder if she truly had been influenced by some bizarre ideology. Could she have been manipulated by someone like Ethan, or some online influencer spouting nonsense? I wrestled with these questions, tossing and turning at night. Eventually, Naomi wore me down, coaxing me into a single therapy session. She said it would give me closure, at the very least. I reluctantly agreed, arriving at a small counseling office on a rainy Thursday evening. Naomi was already there, looking nervous, twisting her hands in her lap. The counselor, Dr. Alvarez, greeted me warmly, and I did my best to remain polite. We sat in a cramped, beige-walled room with 2 chairs and a sofa. Dr. Alvarez asked Naomi to explain why she wanted me there, and she repeated her desire to show me she was serious about changing. Then, gently, Dr. Alvarez probed my perspective, inviting me to share how I felt about Naomi's betrayal. I started slowly, describing the shock, the betrayal, the madness of her excuse. Naomi listened, her eyes brimming with tears. In the quiet that followed, Dr. Alvarez acknowledged that Naomi's logic was irrational and harmful. She explained how some pop psychology or sensational media can twist people's perspectives if they're already vulnerable, confused, or fearful of settling. Naomi hunched forward, admitting she had felt a deep-seated terror that our relationship was too perfect, that maybe she was missing experiences, or that she'd someday resent me for not having explored. Instead of communicating those fears, she tried to handle them alone, stumbling across those destructive solutions. She said she knew it was insane, and that she regretted it deeply. As we talked, I felt some tension in me ease. Hearing a professional confirm the twisted logic behind Naomi's actions didn't fix the hurt, but it validated my anger. The counselor's gentle guidance allowed me to say everything I'd been holding back. I told Naomi how humiliating it was to discover she preferred to run off with some stranger to reassure herself that she loved me. How belittling it felt that she thought so little of my feelings, all in the name of testing loyalty. She cried openly, apologizing again, promising she would never repeat such a mistake if I gave her another chance. I left that session feeling a strange combination of relief and emotional exhaustion. Dr. Alvarez suggested I take as long as I needed to decide the relationship's fate. In the ensuing weeks, Naomi continued therapy. She sent me updates about her progress and asked if we could continue sessions together. I declined for the time being, preferring to gather my thoughts alone. I needed to determine if I even wanted a future with her. I fluctuated wildly, one day certain I could never forgive her, the next day recalling our good memories and questioning if I was overreacting. My life became an internal tug-of-war. Naomi stayed away from the apartment, living with her friend, giving me space. But she never stopped trying, never stopped reaching out with messages of remorse and hope. There were times I just wanted to block her number to free myself from the mental anguish. Other times, I found a strange comfort in her persistence, as if it proved she truly cared. Eventually, I agreed to a second therapy session. This time, Dr. Alvarez guided us through a painful conversation about boundaries and trust. Naomi divulged that she had ended all contact with Ethan, gone so far as to delete every social media connection and block his phone number. She said she understood that she had to be transparent if there was any chance to rebuild trust. Dr. Alvarez turned to me, asking what I needed from Naomi to feel safe again. I hesitated, uncertain if I even wanted to try. But after a moment, I confessed that if we were to move forward, I'd want zero secrets, absolute honesty. I wanted her to realize the magnitude of her breach. Naomi nodded, saying she'd do anything to make amends. I walked out of that second session without giving a definitive answer about our relationship, but I felt the stirrings of hope. Could we rebuild? I wasn't sure, but at least now the conversation was honest, stripped of the illusions and lies. Over the next few months, we met with Dr. Alvarez regularly. Naomi moved back into her old place with her roommate, giving me the emotional space I needed. We focused on open communication exercises, tackling issues of self-esteem, fear of missing out, and the misguided beliefs that led her astray. I saw a genuine change in her, a humbler side that replaced the carefree flamboyance she once displayed. Some might argue it was too late, that the damage had been done. Yet, a cautious part of me considered the possibility of forgiveness. I tested her consistency, questioning her about where she went, who she saw. Not because I wanted to be controlling, but because I needed reassurance her words matched her actions. She seemed to understand, never growing defensive, always providing clear answers and even inviting me to join her in activities I used to avoid. We started small, meeting for a casual coffee, texting each other after therapy sessions, sharing small achievements. Eventually, the tension between us started to ease. That didn't erase what happened, though. I'd lie awake some nights, imagining her with Ethan, picturing their clandestine weekends. My stomach would twist, and I'd feel anger bubble up. In those moments, the memory of her saying she cheated to test her loyalty felt like a raw wound. I questioned whether I could ever fully heal. Time progressed, and Naomi remained steadfast. She never wavered in her apology, never downplayed how stupid her excuse was. Gradually, I found myself accepting parts of her explanation, not as a justification, but as a tragic series of errors fueled by fear, gullibility, and poor judgment. She took full responsibility, which at least helped me see she wasn't deflecting blame. Part of me still thought it might be best to walk away, to find someone who would never risk such betrayal. But life is rarely so simple. I had loved Naomi deeply. Perhaps I still did, in a wounded, cautious way. 3 months after the initial confrontation, Naomi and I decided to try dating each other again, slowly, intentionally, without the comfort of living together. We set boundaries, no more hidden agendas, no more sketchy weekend getaways, total honesty about any lingering doubts. We still attended couples therapy, which helped us navigate the delicate process of rebuilding. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd lash out at her over minor things, old anger surfacing unexpectedly. Other times, she'd break down, apologizing for the 1000th time, feeling unworthy of my forgiveness. Each time, Dr. Alvarez guided us back to communication and empathy, reminding us that rebuilding trust was a process. Some days, I questioned if it was worth the pain. Yet on the nights we reconnected emotionally, sharing jokes, cooking together, or recalling simpler times, I sensed the flicker of what made us strong before. Over time, I began to understand the deeper layers of Naomi's excuse. It wasn't just a superficial line, it was a reflection of her internal fear that she wasn't enough, that she needed external validation or excitement to confirm her choices. She admitted feeling overwhelmed by how well we got along, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. She wondered if she should explore before committing. Unfortunately, she chose the worst possible route. In therapy, she often wept over how she wished she could have just told me she was scared, that maybe we were moving too fast. Ironically, I would have been open to those discussions. I had no urgency to rush into marriage or anything else. But she never gave me the chance to reassure her. A year passed from the time I first discovered her secret. By then, we had established a cautious reconciliation. We never pretended everything was perfect, but we learned to talk openly about our worries. I told her that I still got anxious when she went out of town, even if it was just to visit family. She understood, offering to share itineraries or call me from the road. I never demanded those measures, but she insisted, saying she wanted me to feel secure. We also made a pact: any time either of us felt unsettled or scared about our relationship, we'd say so immediately instead of burying it. Despite the gravity of her betrayal, I found myself respecting her efforts. Some of my friends called me a fool for giving her another shot. I didn't blame them. It was easier to think in black and white terms: once a cheater, always a cheater. But life is complicated. People are messy, shaped by fears and flawed logic. I didn't want to define Naomi solely by her worst decision. She was also the woman who made me laugh uncontrollably, who cared for me when I was sick, who supported my goals and listened to my worries. If I could find it in my heart to forgive, maybe we could build something stronger out of the wreckage. That thought gave me a sliver of hope. During the second year of our slow rebuilding, we faced new challenges. Naomi got a promotion at her job, which demanded more travel, more networking events. This tested the fragile trust we'd pieced together. At first, I felt uneasy whenever she mentioned traveling to a conference or an out-of-town meeting. She sensed my tension and offered to video call at night, to send me updates from the event. Again, I never demanded it, but she was proactive, showing me she learned from her mistakes. Over time, my anxiety lessened. I still remembered Ethan and the wellness retreats, but the sting gradually dulled. I discovered that while the memory might never fully vanish, it was possible to move forward if we both remained committed to honesty. Eventually, I decided to share my story, anonymously, on a relationship forum. I wanted to see if others had navigated a similar form of betrayal. The responses were mixed. Some people called Naomi's excuse the dumbest they'd ever heard, urging me to leave her. Others offered nuanced perspectives on how fear and confusion can lead to self-sabotage. Reading those varied takes, I realized how unusual her reasoning was, but also that I wasn't alone in grappling with betrayal. Many relationships had endured affairs, sometimes recovering, sometimes not. Ultimately, it came down to the sincerity of the remorse, the willingness to change, and the survivor's capacity to forgive. I closed my laptop feeling a bit less alone, though no more certain of the future. Naomi and I continued attending therapy, though less frequently, maybe once a month. Each session felt like a checkpoint, reminding us to stay vigilant about our communication. I discovered that talking openly about even the smallest doubts prevented them from festering. We learned to be forthright about everything, from how we felt about each other's friends to the level of intimacy we desired. To my surprise, we grew closer. The vulnerability, while scary, became the glue that held us together. Slowly, I found myself trusting her again. It didn't happen overnight, but piece by piece, the wall I'd built around my heart started to crumble. 3 years after the day I caught Naomi's messages, we stood in our living room, which was now a different apartment we'd chosen together. She took my hands in hers, and I looked into her eyes. The memory of her betrayal still lingered somewhere deep inside, but it no longer controlled me. We'd spent countless nights discussing how to move forward, and we'd built a new foundation that didn't rely on naive assumptions. That day, she told me she loved me more than she thought possible. I believed her. We decided to move forward with an official engagement, though we kept it modest and low-key. We both understood that the piece of paper wasn't magic. Our commitment had been forged in the fires of heartbreak and restored trust. On the day we got engaged, some might have expected a grand celebration, but we kept it private. We went to a quiet beach at sunrise, one of the few places we both found peaceful. She slipped a ring onto my finger, and I did the same for her. We said our vows in soft voices, promising honesty, no matter how difficult, no matter how scary. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't the romantic scene I might have pictured years ago, before her affair. But it was real, and that made it precious. We knew we were still works in progress, but we believed in the power of forgiveness and hard-won second chances. Sometimes, late at night, Naomi would share her lingering regrets. She would say she wished she could take back every moment she spent in that cabin with Ethan, that she felt a wave of shame whenever she remembered how ridiculous her justification had been. I'd hold her close, reminding her that we couldn't change the past, only learn from it. Then, I'd recall my own regrets, how I wished I had noticed her fears, how I wished I'd probed deeper whenever she acted strangely. Of course, none of that excused her betrayal, but it reminded me that relationships can be fragile, and without communication, even the best ones can fall apart. One night, as we lay in bed, she told me she still got nightmares sometimes, dreaming she'd fallen back into that twisted logic and that I'd left her for good. I stroked her hair, whispering reassurances. She said she understood if I never fully trusted her again, but she'd keep proving herself every day. I admitted that the scar might remain, but scars can be a reminder of survival rather than just pain. That small exchange summed up our new dynamic: honest, humble, hopeful. When people ask how we manage to forgive and stay together, I often struggle to articulate it. The short answer is that it was excruciatingly hard, and many couples would have split for far less. But we held on to a tiny ember of love, coaxing it back to life with vulnerability, therapy, and unflinching conversations. Naomi's excuse for cheating, her need to test her loyalty, will forever strike me as incredibly foolish. Yet it was born from a real place of fear and misguided advice, not from a desire to hurt me. Over time, I've come to see her choice as a symptom of deeper insecurities, ones we addressed in therapy. That doesn't erase the hurt it caused, but it reframes it in a way that allowed me to find closure. Every so often, we'll come across something in a movie or a book referencing infidelity, and I'll feel a pang in my chest. She'll glance at me, and I'll offer a faint smile, letting her know I'm okay. I won't pretend I'm magically healed, or that I never feel the sting of the memory. But each time, the ache is smaller, overshadowed by the knowledge of how hard she's worked to regain my trust. Some of my friends remain skeptical, waiting for her to slip up again. But I'm learning to live for myself, not by their judgments. We had to walk this path on our own terms. One day, Naomi found an old journal entry she'd written during her affair. It was tucked away in a pile of random notebooks. She showed it to me, tears in her eyes, asking if I wanted to read it or if we should destroy it. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed to read it. It was raw, filled with confusion and regret even then. She wrote about not wanting to hurt me, about feeling trapped by her own curiosity. My heart tightened as I read her confusion in real time, but there was something freeing about seeing her mindset. It confirmed what she'd told me. From the start, she knew it was a horrible idea, yet she still went through with it. I appreciated that she trusted me enough to show me that piece of herself. We burned the pages afterward, a small symbolic gesture of letting go. Over the years, we built new memories that stood apart from the old ones tainted by betrayal. We traveled together, explored new hobbies, and supported each other's personal goals. Naomi turned her crisis into a passion for honest communication, sometimes volunteering at local workshops that encouraged couples to talk openly about their fears. It was her way of atoning, I suppose. I still remember one workshop where she stood in front of a small group, sharing a cautionary tale about how she nearly lost everything because of misguided choices and poor communication. I saw in her eyes a genuine humility, and it reminded me how far we had come. We made new friends, some of whom knew nothing of our past drama. They saw us as a normal, happy couple, unaware of the complicated path we took to get there. Occasionally, I'd catch Naomi's eye across a dinner table, and I'd sense her relief that we'd moved beyond the worst. It's not that we hid our story out of shame, rather, we didn't feel the need to broadcast it unless it could help someone else. Slowly, our life started to feel ordinary, with the betrayal becoming a distant memory. Of course, ordinary never erases the fact that we were once anything but. We still encountered triggers, like if she ran into someone who looked like Ethan, or if she mentioned a coworker who was overly friendly. In those moments, I'd feel my chest tighten, but we'd talk through it. She never dismissed my feelings, instead apologizing again for putting me in a position where that old fear could resurface. Each honest conversation pushed us a little closer to true healing. And eventually, the day came when I realized I didn't think about her affair anymore in my daily life. The memory only emerged sporadically, usually as a fleeting thought that no longer carried the same destructive power. As time rolled on, we settled into a life that felt undeniably ours. When we decided to marry officially with friends and family present, we chose a small ceremony on a cliff overlooking the ocean, nothing extravagant, just a moment that was meaningful. My parents and sister looked relieved that I had found peace. Naomi's parents, who'd learned the broad strokes of what happened, seemed grateful I'd given her a second chance. That day, standing in front of our loved ones, I felt a surge of gratitude that we had transformed a nightmare into something workable. We exchanged vows that underscored honesty and patience, two qualities we'd learned the hard way. After the ceremony, as we celebrated with a modest reception, I caught sight of a few disapproving looks from people who believed I was a fool for marrying someone who'd once cheated. But I held Naomi's hand, reminded of her genuine remorse and the years of effort to make amends. Our honeymoon was simple, just a cabin by a lake, ironically reminiscent of the place Naomi and Ethan once used for their illicit meetings. Naomi apologized profusely for the association, but I told her it was fine. We were reclaiming any painful imagery, transforming it into a positive memory of our own. We spent those days canoeing, reading books by the fire, and talking about our future. Perhaps in another world, I would have never stayed with a cheater. But in this reality, I witnessed someone who confronted her darkest mistake and worked to become a better partner. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it showed me people could grow if they truly yearn for redemption. Now, looking back on the entire saga, I still shake my head at how unbelievably stupid her original excuse was. Telling someone you cheated to test your loyalty is practically a punchline in a bad sitcom. Yet, in a convoluted way, it forced us to face truths about ourselves and our relationship we might have ignored otherwise. I'm not defending her betrayal, nor do I recommend anyone follow that twisted path. But for us, it became a turning point, a harsh, painful catalyst for deeper introspection. I'm not naive enough to declare we're unbreakable now, but we are more aware, more cautious with each other's hearts, and that might be what saves us in the long run. Sometimes I wonder how different our lives would be if she hadn't given in to that insane notion. Maybe we'd have gone on like a regular couple, never experiencing such a catastrophic breach. But maybe we'd have encountered a different crisis. Every relationship has hidden cracks that can split under pressure. We just discovered ours in the most jarring way possible. At least now, I know the importance of direct communication, and so does she. I have no illusions about the fragility of love, but I also recognize its resilience when both parties fight to keep it alive. Our story isn't a fairy tale. It doesn't end with a magical resolution where everything is perfect. We still have occasional arguments. Trust, while largely restored, can be fragile on my bad days. But we also have a shared history of triumphing over adversity, which gives us a kind of battle-tested bond. We look out for each other's vulnerabilities, reminding ourselves to address issues before they become unspoken resentments or misguided pursuits. In that sense, we've turned a horrible situation into a learning experience. And though her reason for cheating was unbelievably stupid, I've learned that behind every stupid reason is usually a scared human being, fumbling to make sense of complex emotions. Whenever I recount the broad strokes of what happened, people inevitably ask, how could you possibly forgive her after that? Sometimes I shrug, unsure if I have the perfect answer. Other times, I explain that forgiveness isn't about condoning the act, it's about recognizing the layers of a person. Naomi made a terrible choice. But after that, she made countless right choices to prove her sincerity and her capacity for change. I decided her effort was worth acknowledging. Forgiveness, in that sense, is a leap of faith, albeit one grounded in continuous proof that she wouldn't repeat her mistake. So far, she hasn't. As I sit here now, reflecting on the entire journey, I'm struck by the power of one misguided idea. Naomi risked everything by choosing to explore as a way to confirm her love for me. It still boggles my mind that anyone could believe such logic. Yet it happens more often than we think. People sabotage good things out of fear or under the influence of bad advice. If anything, our story is a testament to the importance of questioning advice that encourages deception or betrayal. It's a reminder that real loyalty can only be tested by mutual respect and transparent communication, not by going behind someone's back. If more people understood that, maybe fewer relationships would implode under the weight of reckless experiments. In the end, her excuse for cheating was so stupid. I couldn't believe my ears, might be the perfect summary of how I felt in that pivotal moment. The shock and disbelief nearly broke me. But with time, determination, and a willingness on her part to do whatever it took to make amends, we survived. Our relationship looks different now, more cautious, more deliberate. Yet it's also deeper in some ways, because we faced the worst and emerged together. I won't pretend there isn't a scar. But that scar reminds us of what we almost lost, urging us to be kinder, clearer, and more appreciative of each other every day. And maybe that's the closest thing to a happy ending we'll ever get, a hard-earned clarity that love can endure if two people fight for it, even when the excuse for the betrayal defies all logic.